All right, y'all, welcome back. I wanted to show you how to find PTOU, PTOD on the 15 minute. So, if you are a person where you're like, okay, trading the 4 hour is just not realistic, you just rather have shorter trades, I'm going to show you how you can find the PTOU on the smaller time frames, right? And so we're going to go to the 15 minute. I specifically like the 15 minute because I think the 1 hour can just be a little wonky. So I prefer the 15 minute to look for that. So I'm just going to move our ATR out the way so we can see this clearly. All right. So here's where the market started today. This was the low. And as you can see between here, right? Price, this red to red made a higher low here, right? Something to be mindful is this was built off of what? This was built off of the last day low that we had on Friday. So now let's clone this, right? We're going to clone this. Right. I'm going to make that a different color. Okay. And then I'm going to also measure the top here. So we're going to measure our last high to this high, right? Which we still have 7 minutes in this candle. So we could technically make another high here. So I'm going to go back a high here. I'm going to go to this high and then to that high. And then I'm going to clone that. I'm going to clone that here. All right. And then I'm going to make this a different color. Then I'm going to get my horizontal line. And then I'm going to build some targets here. So that being my top, middle being middle, and then technically here being that first. But as you can see, sorry, it would have been here. As you can see, if you would have got in here, right, if we would have saw this 15-minute earlier, if you would have got in for a buy here, you would have hit that target, that first target there. And if you trusted it and kept holding it, I'm pretty sure it's going to go up into this third target. And so sometimes, depending on how much time I have, I will trade, higher highs, higher lows here. And so I will say with the 15 minutes, sometimes you'll see a lot of equal highs happen here. But for the most part, the 15-minute and the 4 hour are going to continue to make higher highs, higher lows. The 1 hour does it too. It's just not as consistent for me as the 15-minute. The 1 hour is not as consistent as the 15-minute. I can find more of the trend here, right? So like even if I wanted to draw my trend line here, this is what I can see being that trend here, right? And then if I duplicated this, right, I can see like we're going to keep moving up here. It's very clear to me that we are going to keep moving up here. But I at least wanted to show you guys for those who, you don't want to sit there and watch a 4 hour candle. Maybe you want to just trade the actual 15-minute. I wanted to show you how that's possible. And how you can trade that is you can trade it as it goes, meaning you could have took a buy here, right? Boom, you could have got out there. I wouldn't sell. So something to note, if price is on a PTOU, I wouldn't be so strong on sales because you have 15 minutes here. So that was a 30-minute of a red. Sometimes it's not worth it unless you're okay with watching it. I won't lie and say I haven't done both sides, but just be mindful if price is heavy uptrend, just be mindful when you get into that sell, right? Because you could buy here, right? Once it's finished making that point, you could buy to the bottom low chain. Once it's finished, you could buy up and then see here is where our next low is going to be, meaning you could sell up here to this point. Just be mindful that the trend is still heavy buy. So you just don't want to get caught up in that sell and then prices like, actually, we want to keep going higher, right? But I at least wanted to show you guys the 15-minute opportunities because they can very well be accurate just as much as the 4-hour, and it gives you a shorter trade. Obviously, you're not holding this trade, right? If you get into a 15-minute trade, meaning at this point, if you would have entered a buy here, you would have only held it for 15 minutes, which look at that. This is a 15-minute candle. Hold it for 15 minutes and get out, right? If you wanted to keep going, you could, but as you can see, this new 15-minute came and broke down here a lot more. And let's just say you see how we have this red, we got 3 minutes left. Let's say this doesn't conquer itself and it ends red. I would then change my measuring tool for the second one. I would then measure it between those two, right? Depending on how it ends. And then I would clone it. And then I would gauge my next red to that point. Only if it ends red. Obviously, we know in a chart, a lot can happen in 3 minutes. Only if it ended red, I would change that distance because then I'm telling myself, hey, this next low may be here because this is what happened here, right? But you only do that when the trade ends. So I'm going to keep it here because we got 2 minutes left and this candle does look like it's going to end in green. But I just wanted to show you whenever it's like not going to end that way, that's how I would measure it from that point. And so if you find yourself wanting to trade, I would say the 15-minute will be my trade point because you could enter. And then obviously, if the 1 hour gives us an accumulation, you can trade that breakout. But when it comes to trading the higher highs, higher lows, 15-minute and the 4-hour is typically what I'm going to trade that from. So here's how that trade played out. So not only did it hit our third target, it also conquered. Remember, we were in the process of deciding if this candle would end green, and it did. So it pretty much followed our markup to the T. And if we had marked up zones here, we would know that price would get here and struggle a bit. So, meaning our next 15 minutes should then come down to this point and hit this red here. So, we are looking for our next 15-minute to come in and then make this as our low. So, not only did price hit our target, it may have enough steam to keep pushing. So, had you been trading this in real time, what you would then do is you would then move your stop loss. Where would you move it? You would move your stop loss in profit. So then you could either move your stop loss here to this target here because we know that price is going to at some point come down here and make this low. So you could move your stop loss up under it, or you can move your stop loss here if you're just like, hey, I don't want to be a part of the fight. Or you can start trailing it from this point, because at some point price will have to make this low. But again, you are trading a 15-minute. So who knows if price is like, hey, we have enough steam. We want to keep going. So then at that point, you would just gauge how you actually would trade this. Our 15-minute has a lot of steam here. And let's investigate why, because our targets can now go off of zones. Now that we have measured to this point and we see prices like, hey, it has hella steam, which as you can see here, sometimes the 15-minute will get a lot of steam back tested. So it's been known to have a lot of steam at some point. So meaning if price is going to go past this low, then now let's review some zones as our target. Meaning when price was here before, which down here, there was a lot of push up into this point that it's at, which look at what happens when we back test as well. You see, before we even back test how this was going to be the new low, look here when price pushed up before, where did it come down and make a low? Here on that same line. You see why measuring is so important? And then when you back test, now you're like, oh yeah, we're definitely going to do this because we did it before. Like price literally off that same push at the bottom, it was able to go. And then at some point, this here is where we had a lot of rejection. And then price eventually made this low, which is where we've measured for this to land anyway, which connects to our back test. This is why I love measuring it. And so now it's like, okay, that's a high probability that price will make a low here at some point because we see it happen before and it's in alignment with our marking, you know? But we see another zone here. When price made that low, here's a few zones. If we conquer this zone, which it looks like this 15-minute wants to push past this zone here, meaning this is a current stack that's here, was a zone. Price, if it keeps pushing, what's our next zone up there? What's our next zone? Here's our next zone. So price may conquer this area and keep going further. Let's go in our 1 minute and investigate. So in our 1 minute, price could still very tap those zones, but our 1 minute is showing us what? That price is starting to what? Go down. Let's go to our 5 minute. Our 5 minute is having that rejection as well. So we very well may still come down and hit our low. So now you just watch it. So as you can see, we are getting to that low point that we measured from here to here to here to here. This is about to hit it so beautifully. But I also want to make a note here that sometimes it won't hit it as clean. And that's something to be mindful of. Like the measuring, what I want you guys to get from measuring and doing all this stuff that I am teaching you how to do, the measuring is just a way to have a better understanding of what could happen in the market. But the market may not always hit it to the T. Like I always say on all the videos, the more you have marked up, the more you have possibilities, the better your trades just become. So if you had entered a sell up here, you could have put your target as this point, but then obviously as you see the trade growing and growing and you're having resistance, you would then obviously not hold the trade. So I just say that to say is that like the purpose of these targets and measuring and looking up your zones is just so that you can have all your possibilities mapped out ahead of time. Now, if we wanted to see, what's happening here, price got here and it's pushing back off, we can obviously go into our time frames and figure out what's happening here. Boom, this just showed us over here. Look at these zones over here. If we zoom in, let me move this off so it doesn't get confusing. If we zoom in over here, this is our point that we had this push off. Let's go over here and figure out what happens over here. Oh, this is a constant trend over here. That price gets here and look, it pushes. It pushes. It pushes. And so whenever it gets to your markup and you're like, "Hey, price kind of, did it completely hit it." I mean, it got super close. So our measuring tool was pretty accurate, if I would say. It got really close. But here's a zone we see that first target we had, that price had a lot of pressure there, which we already said that in the beginning of the video, is that once we got to that first target, there was going to be a lot of pressure. So we at least got super close, but it's here is what we're now fighting up against, that pressure. So that low came down to where we measured it, but there's a lot of buying pressure here. And so I just wanted to at least see this trade through so that you guys can see how you can also still trade on the 15-minute. All right. So price basically hit our low point to the T. So if we go here to our 15-minute, we literally hit it to the T. Like it made our low that exact distance that we had measured and it hit that. So then you may say, okay, let's say you bought here, you got out, you bought here, you got out. Now you may say, Val, what do I do now? Now we just measure again. You would then, right? I like to start over, right? So let's now measure where it actually landed. Let's get our trend line. I would measure here to here, right? And then I'm going to clone that. And then I'm going to bring that up here, right? And then I'm going to remove these targets because we are done with that. And again, this is just on the 15-minute. We're going to move those targets. And now we're going to build our new targets. So now we have for this next high, you should enter a buy at this bottom here, right? You would enter a buy, and then you would target that as your first, second in the middle, third at the end, and then our new low is going to be, since this was what we measured, now let's do it to the exact there. And we're going to clone it, right? And then we're going to make it a color. We'll just do pink. Now we have our new low and we have our new targets. And you just keep repeating the process over and over and over until the trend starts to shift. All right, that's it, y'all. Let's keep building.